The 80s became the first major decade of comic book entertainment on the big and small screen. This was truly heralded in with two releases that happened at the tail end of the 70s, Superman and The Incredible Hulk. The combined powers of Marvel and DC showed us that comic book characters and those sorts of stories could actually be filmed in a real-world setting with real people appearing to fly around and save the day. Cue the awe-inspiring music when Stephen J. Cannell decided to create his own hero. This time the hero wouldn't be from another planet, he'd be a hometown guy. His powers wouldn't be from some accident involving radiation, they'd come from aliens, who would be from another planet of course. The greatest American hero would fly, badly, onto TV screens in 1981, right between two Superman film releases, and would capture the hearts of kids and adults alike. It would also give us a theme song that will never leave your head after you watch this video. So let's suit up and try not to crash as we jump into the story of the greatest American hero. And don't forget your dog biscuits. The Greatest American Hero premiered on ABC in 1981 and was formed by the combined powers of TV mega wizards Frank Lupo and Stephen J. Cannell. Lupo was the man behind series like The A-Team, Riptide, and Wise Guy, all of which he created with Cannell. On his own, he'd have series like BJ and the Bear and Werewolf under his belt. What I'm saying is Lupo had an eclectic history when it came to TV. From monkeys to lycanthropies, it makes sense he'd be part of the team to create a show like The Greatest American Hero.
Am I wrong?
The same goes for Cannell,
Am I wrong?
who has a list of shows that would take the entirety of this video just to name a few. The Greatest American Hero follows the story of Ralph. We'll get into his last name a little while later. Ralph is a high school teacher in LA. During a field trip, he runs into a group of aliens in a very large spacecraft. Think of Flat Earth Close Encounters of the Third Kind ship. The aliens give Ralph the gift of a suit and an instruction book for the suit, which will give him extraordinary powers that he needs to help keep humanity safe and on the path of good. In this endeavor, he's to have as his partner FBI agent Bill Maxwell, a crotchety fellow who Ralph has run into seemingly by chance. Ralph almost immediately loses the instruction book, which leads to a George of the Jungle level trial and error in figuring out how the powers work, what powers he has, and a really rough time trying to figure out how to land. Ralph and Bill are assisted in their cases by Ralph's lawyer girlfriend, Pam Davidson. Ralph's class of students are also featured in the episodes, with a number of them recurring. When the show had first been picked up by ABC, Cannell had wanted to focus on more serious subjects throughout the series, instead of physical save-the-day comic book fare. He wanted to focus more on Ralph's world and dealing with having the suit and how he would deal with the changes it would force him to go through. This would fit right in with today's comic book media, and certainly would be a great show to watch. How does a reluctant everyman deal with having the powers of basically a god, and how would he use them? Would he use them? And how would he pick and choose when to? All of this combined with keeping your identity secret, because if you don't, you know your world will implode. You and everyone you love will become a target of someone. But the original executives at ABC left, and the new team decided to make the show more along the lines that would appeal to kids. This back and forth led to the series having a mix of slapstick level physical comedy, moments of seriousness, and some interesting sci-fi, as well as one horror-centric episode. It was clear that the showrunners wanted to go in some interesting directions, but were hampered by decisions at the network level that kept them from pursuing them. I mentioned that we'd get into Ralph's last name at some point, so let's do that now. Depending on the episode you've heard, it was Hinckley and then became Hanley.
Name's Ralph Hanley, Tony.
Something's happened to her, Mr. Hanley.
This happened within the first few episodes of the first season and was due to the assassination attempt on President Reagan. When the powers that be heard the name of the attempted killer was John Hinckley Jr., they didn't want any sort of connection to be made between a show called The Greatest American Hero and a man who just tried to murder the president. So, with some dubbing and quick rewrites, the similar sounding but not exact name Hanley became Ralph's last name. The show had a stellar lead cast that were part of the reason it was such a hit and has continued to be a fan favorite. William Katt was Ralph. Katt had an impressive string of films under his belt before being cast in the TV series. He co-starred opposite Jan Michael Vincent and Gary Busey in the surfer flick Big Wednesday, as well as the western Butch and Sundance, the early days as the Sundance Kid. Prior to The Greatest American Hero, though, Katt would be best remembered as the Golden Boy, Tommy Ross, and Carrie. He brought a likability to Ralph that needed to be there and was able to embody the humor in some of the scenes. He really wanted to be a good person and be there for his students. Katt brought that realness and, when called for, the emotional punch. One interesting fact, though, William Katt hated the suit. Through the run, you'll notice a number of the blue screen shots will be reused, and in certain flying scenes, Ralph's hair will suddenly go back to its season 1 glory. Part of this was due to Katt and the producers figuring out a compromise on cutting down the time he had to wear it. It was pretty form-fitting, so yeah, I get it. Connie Sellecca was Pam. Sellecca had an interesting career prior to Hero as well. A beautiful woman, Sellecca began as a fashion model and made her way to acting. She'd done some interesting genre entries prior to the series, having acted in the second Captain America live-action movie, as well as the Beyond Westworld television series. Pam was only supposed to be a one-off character. At first, she served as Ralph's divorce attorney, but Sellecca worked so well as the character they made her a regular. Now let's talk my favorite character in the show.
Pam Davidson, my attorney. This is Bill Maxwell. We're in the superhero business together.
I know, everyone loves Ralph. What's wrong with you? But I loved Bill. He was grouchy, snarky, and was freaking Robert Culp.
What happened to the presumption of innocence?
Don't give me that garbage.
Culp was a TV and film legend when he joined Greatest American Hero, and he also wrote and directed on some of his previous series, including I Spy. He continued this with Hero.
We need organization. We need command decisions, and we need them now. Command decisions happen to be my forte now.
That's forte.
Writing and directing 2 great episodes, including what would wind up being the series finale. One thing I never knew to be true was, apparently, he really did eat dog treats. Those weren't fake. Bill was just a wonderfully weird character. But the thing about Bill that Robert Culp was so great at doing was showing the warm, fuzzy side of him beneath that gruff exterior and milk-bone breath.
He was supremely confident, and like most people who are supremely confident, very, very vulnerable.
Sadly, Robert Culp would pass away after an accidental fall in 2010 at the age of 79. He was still writing and planning on continuing to direct.
And the more human you can make the character, the funnier you can make it.
Confession time. As a kid, after watching this show and learning to love Bill, I tried to eat a damn milk bone. It did not go well.
You all right?
I could only assume Bill Maxwell had no taste buds left. Ralph's high school students had a couple standout actors of note. Faye Grant was just about the same age as Connie Sellecca when she played high schooler Rhonda in the show. She'd go on a few years later to be a standout in the series V. Michael Pare would play Tony, again around the same age as Sellecca. Pare would hit cult status a few years later with Eddie and the Cruisers and Streets of Fire. A number of guest stars would show up during the 3 seasons of the series. Clayton Moore, the original Lone Ranger, would make an appearance, as well as John Hart, who also played the Lone Ranger in the series. Jason and Joseph Culp, both sons of Robert, would appear in the show. A very young Bob Saget and Billy Zabka would also pop up during the run, as would Andre the Giant. But perhaps the most endearing memory, other than Ralph flailing crazily in the suit, was the theme song of The Greatest American Hero. Believe it or not, is an earworm of perfection, and more than a few kids my age will find themselves humming it suddenly because it was everywhere in the 80s. The song's music was composed by Mike Post. He's another of those artists that, when you look at the history of what they've created, is a list of literally everything you've ever watched. Post had a knack for making TV theme songs that are some of the best around. That included the Rockford Files theme, the A-Team, and Quantum Leap, just to name a few. The catchy lyrics came from Stephen Geyer, another TV music whiz. Geyer worked on shows like Hardcastle and McCormick, and would go on to work on the infamous Cop Rock. something someday we may dare to revisit here. Look, we have to admit that cop rock happened. It was real. Believe It or Not was sung by Joey Scarbury. Scarbury sung a number of TV themes over the years. The song would be the biggest hit of his career. It would actually hit number 2 on the Billboard Charts. The 80s were an interesting time when a number of TV anthems would be hitting radio, and this would include all instrumental ones like Simon & Simons and Hill Street Blues. They were just that good. But Believe It or Not has gone on to show up in other TV series, most famously as George Costanza's answering machine message.
Where could I be? Believe it or not, I'm not home.
It's a piece of pop culture history that, even if you've never watched The Greatest American Hero, chances are you've heard the song at some point. But just like Ralph's attempts at flying, it wasn't always smooth sailing. At the beginning of the series, Katt and Culp didn't really get along. According to Katt, the actors used this in their performances, as Ralph and Bill didn't really mesh well at first either. The two did become good friends over the course of filming, much like their characters. Another bumpy patch came in the form of Warner Brothers and DC Comics. The look and powers that the suit gave Ralph were too much like Superman's for their taste, and they actually sued the show. The lawsuit was thrown out of court, but to me and a number of other people, the series was more Green Lantern than Superman. The little green men would search throughout the galaxy, bestowing superpowers on those they chose to defend green planets like Earth. This is literally the exact thing that happens in making the Green Lantern Corps. They also wear matching white suits with the same emblem on them as Ralph's super suit. Again, a lot like the Green Lantern Corps. The aliens are interesting parts of the series, and something I don't think gets mentioned enough when people talk about it. They have some major powers. UFOs filled with bodies in some sort of suspended animation, and they have the ability to bring the dead back to life. This is some heavy stuff. In the final episode, when Ralph looks for a replacement for the suit, they are able to pull a Doctor Strange and wipe the knowledge of his identity from the planet's mind. When I say final episode, I need to be clear. The Greatest American Hero made it 3 seasons, but was canceled in 1983. The final 4 episodes of the original run weren't aired on ABC as part of that run, but when the series was parceled out for syndication, they were included and shown then and were in the eventual DVD releases. That's when something odd happened, at least for the time. In 1986, NBC decided to give Ralph and Company another shot, and so The Greatest American Heroine was filmed. This was back when rival networks didn't really pick up shows others had bailed on, and especially a spin-off. But the show only made it for a pilot movie, and NBC didn't proceed or even show the pilot. Eventually, it would be released as part of the DVD sets and its own solo release. Nowadays, you can see it on the free streaming service Tubi. The spinoff had Ralph, Pam, and Bill back. With Ralph's identity blown as the guy in the suit, Ralph never did figure out a superhero name. The aliens make a deal with him. Find someone worthy of the suit, and they will wipe the memory of his identity, which has now made him a celebrity, from the world. Eventually, Ralph settles on Holly, an elementary school teacher and good-hearted woman who wants to make the world better. Holly becomes partners with Bill in the same way Ralph did. Over the last decade, a few attempts have happened to try and do a reboot of the show. The last was in 2018 on ABC, which was to have a female lead wearing the suit, but the network didn't pick up the show. 13 years ago, a fan-made web series recreated the original with a 6-episode run from Woohoo Productions, which you can still watch on YouTube. The Greatest American Hero is one of those lightning in a bottle type of shows, I think, which is why no one has ever been able to replicate it. The cast and the creators at the time made it work. The story was a good one that didn't take itself too seriously, but was also earnest. There were some truly strange episodes, like that time Bill got possessed by the ghost of a dead murderous woman. Ralph then went into a weird afterlife dimension where he's attacked by a devil dog. This really did happen, and it was truly trippy. But I think one of the coolest bits of the show was the fact that at the end of the day, the Greatest American Heroes were both teachers. Ralph and Holly just wanted to help their students learn and to do what was right. And that's who the aliens saw as the best of us, and thanks to the show, kids in the 80s and beyond got to see that too. So if you're interested in watching a classic gem of superhero media, there are plenty of places to watch it online. Freevee, Pluto TV, and Roku are just a few of the many streaming services you can watch the show for free. So there's no excuse not to check out a few episodes of this forgotten gem. You don't even need an instruction manual.